Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are cracking open a phenomenon that has just completely dominated the literary world over the last few years, especially on platforms like BookTok.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about Romantasy.
Fantasy romance. It is, well, it's explosive. We're talking about book series like Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses.
A Kotar, for those in the know.
Right, A Kotar, or, Rebecca Yaros's Fourth Wing. These are selling millions and millions of copies. I mean, these authors have become genuine literary rock stars almost overnight.
They're printing money.
Faster than the U.S. Mint.
Right. The sources we pulled for this deep dive, they're really curious about this one specific paradox. The heroines in these massively successful books think Fira in A Kotar or Bryce in House of Earth and Blood.
Violet in Fourth Wing.
Yeah, Violet. They share certain traits, on the surface, with Hollywood's modern female archetypes, the strong, independent girl boss's character.
Like Captain Marvel.
Or Rey Palpatine, exactly.
Yeah. And they're strong, they're independent, they are often fighting these enormous existential cosmic battles. They seem to check all the boxes that visual media believes female audiences want.
But they don't.
Well, the movies don't. When Hollywood tries to replicate that exact archetype on screen, often with the, explicit goal of drawing in that female audience, the results are,
a flop.
Yeah.
They range from just critical indifference to being an outright commercial flop. And that really is the ultimate mission of this deep dive. Why are these books resonating so strongly with women? Well, what specific emotional needs, what deep-seated fantasies are they fulfilling that visual media is just consistently, fundamentally ignoring?
We're really trying to dive deep into the core patterns of female emotional fantasy, which, and this is the key point from the source material, is not the same thing as a male power fantasy with a female lead is swapped in.
Not at all.
And we have a fantastic stack of sources for this. We're pulling insights from the dynamic A Court of Thorns and Roses and its related House of Earth and Blood, of course, the runaway hit Fourth Wing, the historical romance turning.
And even some slightly softer but really instructive stuff, right?
Yeah, the Paladin books, T. Kingfisher's Paladin's Grace. We're looking for that narrative substance, the emotional architecture that Hollywood seems terrified to build.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's unpack this, starting with what has to be the most undeniable difference. One of our sources called it the big old veiny difference.
And they're not wrong.
The explicit and completely unapologetic presence of romance and desire.
That is the corner 100. Hollywood seems to have adopted this really limiting paradigm that dictates that if a female lead is strong, she must by narrative necessity asexual.
Or at least, romance has to be a sidebar.
A weakness.
Yeah, a vulnerability that detracts from her core mission.
It's this Hollywood paradigm failure. They lean so hard into this idea that if a character is strong, she must be entirely self-sufficient. She needs nothing and no one.
And the sources point out that so many female leads over the last decade have been intentionally, neutered in terms of romance. They're lusting for status or power or personal identity, but not for partnership.
You see it in characters like Rhea, Mirabelle, even Newland going way back. The core narrative is always,
I don't need no man.
Exactly. And that ideology is sometimes communicated through very pointed, almost heavy-handed symbolism.
You mean like Captain Marvel breaking the biker guy's wrist?
That's the one. The intention was clearly to symbolize this decisive rejection of toxic masculinity, right? Asserting physical superiority.
Or Rey. Rey repeatedly rejecting Finn's hand.
Yes. It wasn't just rejecting physical connection. It was rejecting the symbolic offering of partnership over and over again.
So the takeaway from those scenes, at least as it's often interpreted, is that strength means being single.
Or that desiring a partnership, or God forbid sexual pursuit, is somehow the same as weakness, that it's succumbing to toxicity.
But our source material suggests that this interpretation of female strength, which, let's be honest, often ends up just looking like a toxic masculine power fantasy pasted onto a woman. That's precisely what's failing to attract the audience they wanted.
Because when you strip a character of their relational desires, you strip them of a massive part of their humanity.
Well, their vulnerability.
Yes, and that vulnerability is often the very thing that readers connect with. These romantasy books, they thrive on it.
So what happens then when a male lead is included in these big Hollywood properties?
Well, he's almost always new or lost or just completely subservient to the female lead's narrative. He's there to be rescued, maybe, or to provide some emotional validation.
But he never commands the plot himself.
Never. The critique that just devastates this model is the passive wet noodle, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
It's everywhere.
Look at the recent Disney example. Woody in Toy Story 4. He's lost, he's directionless, he's basically just following Bo Peep's lead. She's the competent, seasoned adventurer now.
And Wade in Elemental, he was described simply as encouraging.
Just encouraging. His whole purpose is to validate the female lead's feelings. He's a complete emotional drip.
So visual media is trying this kind of exaggerated, often really clumsy role reversal. They think that by making the man passive, they're elevating the woman.
But the result is a character who fundamentally lacks competence, assertiveness, and, frankly, attraction.
Yeah.
And this is where the historical contrast the sources bring up is so important. Compare these modern passive leads to classic heroes, Indiana Jones. Even when he was weak, he was always assertive.
If you want me, Willie, you know where you can find me.
Exactly. He commanded attention and action.
Right. So what happens when these male characters are passive? They fail to attract the audience. The books are selling men who are assertively competent.
And the movies are selling men who couldn't command an Amazon device. They're just weak characters, full stop. And weak characters fail to engage audiences regardless of gender.
Which brings us directly to the Romantasy book boyfriends.
And the contrast is just absolute. These male leads, they're defined not just by competence, but by their intense, overwhelming, often obsessive attraction male protagonists.
They're not just supportive.
No, they are captivated.
They're big in every sense of the word. Everything about them is exaggerated. The muscles, the personality, the sheer scale of their feelings.
And even when Smolder McHardbody is supposed to be slaying literal nightmare monsters or fighting cosmic wars, the sources point out that he is constantly preoccupied mid-action with the main character.
Her safety, her desirability, her competence.
The book dialogue is often not far from, "I'm obsessed with you," or "You are my entire world." The central fantasy here, which Hollywood seems utterly convinced is insulting to modern women, is the desire to be overwhelmingly wanted.
Prioritized.
Desired and prioritized above all other concern, even in the middle of an action. The protagonist isn't a side quest for him. She is the main objective.
It's the yearning for yearning, the desperate emotional begging for that love. And this leads to a really crucial point about the pacing in these books. Yes, they feature explicit sex scenes.
Often described in, let's be honest, sometimes cringeworthy detail.
Right, sometimes contributing to some unrealistic standards for sure. But the physical part, the culmination, it is almost always earned.
Exactly. It's not a casual conquest. The physical act is a resolution to intense emotional and relational conflict. It validates the immense emotional pressure that's been built up over hundreds of pages of yearning and meaning.
The sex scene is often, what, 2/3 of the way through the book?
Or even in a sequel. This is so different from the shallow sexual conquest narratives that visual media sometimes tries to push as female empowerment. In Romantasy, the romance needs a substantial emotional build.
Okay, let's drill down on that. Why does that delay, that timing matter so much?
It creates emotional stakes. I mean, think about it. If the characters jump into bed on page 50, the central question of the plot shifts from will they be together to how long will this last?
It becomes a different story.
Completely. By delaying the physical part, the tension reinforces the value of the emotional connection. The desire is so intense that the characters have to save the world first or face down their enemies before they can physically resolve that. The physical relationship validates the emotional journey the reader has just been on with the heroine.
That makes perfect sense. The emotional payoff is the real commodity being sold, not just the physical act. So if the massive, undeniable difference is this robust, unapologetic romance and desire, that's just the foundation. If the heroine is being desired so intensely, what kind of power is she wielding to warrant that desire?
That's a great question, and it shifts our lens perfectly into our second section, where we analyze the deeper power fantasy soul. Hollywood's fundamental failure, as the sources articulate it, is that it offers a male power fantasy.
The lone, strongest, chosen one, dedicated to mastery.
Right. The lone samurai, the silent assassin, the hyper-competent spy, that's the traditional male power fantasy. Winning battles alone, saving the day through inherent superiority, achieving that hyper-competence and mastery. And Hollywood just puts a woman in that role.
But the sources found a really distinct pattern in these romantasy books. Let's call pattern 1, the anti-chosen one.
This is a huge distinction. The female character in these books is rarely the single most powerful entity. She does not level up to handle the entire plot.
Her success isn't defined by her ability to punch harder or cast stronger spells than the villain.
No. The fantasy, instead, is about coalition. It's about building a team. It's about inspiring others through immense bravery. Despite her own personal frailty, she is not the muscle.
She's the heart and humanity of the team.
Exactly. She's often the most vulnerable person in the room, but she's also the most essential.
Look at the example, Fira. In BookTok, she starts as a small, ordinary human girl. She gets cursed, later turned fae. Her major world-changing action is challenging the evil queen.
In a fight she knows she will certainly...
Right, but her action, that sacrifice, bridges the divide between humans and fairies, and it inspires the fae to finally take action. Her strength is moral, not physical.
Or Violet in Fourth Wing. The book is so explicit about this. She's tiny, she's frail, constantly ill. You said earlier she needs a life alert button just to get through the day.
She is physically incapable of achieving the level of brute force needed to survive dragons.
But she builds this powerful group of friends and dragons because she refuses to run away, and she inspires this fierce loyalty through her grit and her determination.
And Clara in Paladin's Grace. Her determination to rescue her fellow nuns is what inspires Isfahan and his whole intimidating crew and the entire monastery to rally around her.
This is a crucial distinction from, say, the male bonding. The male fantasy is often about shared adversity within a winning military mission. The female emotional fantasy is about being the essential emotional center, the catalyst that unlocks strength in others.
It's a different kind of power. It's relational power. And you contrast that with the Hollywood failures the sources cited, like the 2019 Charlie's Angels or Captain Marvel 2. They focus on achieving this hyper solo power.
Climbing the corporate ladder, reigniting a sun, pure abstract solo power. And they failed commercially because they lacked that relational core.
Okay, so that leads directly into pattern 2. Cleverness over strength.
If the heroine isn't the most physically powerful, how does she win?
Through wit, strategy, and mental resilience, she outthinks the challenge. She's reserved and smart.
Penelope Featherington in Bridgerton is the perfect non-magical example. She's not the belle of the ball. She doesn't dominate the social scene.
No, she's secretly Lady Whistledown, the mysterious, essential gossip column. She wins Colin over with her wit, her compassion, and her strategic depth.
And Grace, the perfumer in Paladin's Grace. She uses her expert nose, this talent for differentiating scents, and her connections to solve brutal murder investigations. She's not swinging a sword. She's applying a subtle, highly refined skill.
And Violet, again, unable to brute force anything, must outthink every single situation.
And this is a direct contrast with the typical male power fantasy, which emphasizes leveling up.
Right. Even if cleverness is used in the male fantasy, it's usually just a tool to power up more efficiently.
You're thinking as a character like Lyndon in the Cradle series. He starts by being clever because he's weak. But ultimately, the narrative resolves by making him the strong. He outworks and outmasters everyone else. The fantasy resolves in raw power.
Which explains what our sources call the devastating Ray failure. Ray failed to resonate because she was already great at everything. She was a flawless Mary Sue, chasing that Highlander power fantasy.
There can be only one. The last, most powerful Jedi. No team, no guy she needed, no deep flaw to overcome. She had instantaneous mastery of piloting, lightsaber combat, the Force, everything.
But I'm struggling with that a little bit because Hollywood might argue they were trying to give her a unique power.
The sources argue that the unique power isn't the issue. The lack of relational necessity is. If Hollywood wanted a female character with power who truly resonated with this audience, they should have leaned into a character like Leia or Gunn.
Now there's a contrast. Tell me more about the Leia success versus the Rey failure.
Well, Leia was a diplomat, a mother, a wife, and the essential heart of the team. Did she shoot stormtroopers? Yes, of course. But her real power was building a coalition.
Coordinating the entire rebellion.
Maintaining diplomatic ties, leading the new republic. She was strategic, witty, and deeply relational. Her power came from her ability to inspire and connect people, not from an instantaneous mastery of the Force. The Romantasy audience isn't drawn to the flawless character who's already great. They're drawn to the one who inspires change and builds strength through grit.
That makes the shift so clear. And if the heroine's power is in her wit, her relational ability, her ability to inspire, that immediately changes what she demands from the man she chooses.
Absolutely.
She needs someone who complements that power, not someone who neuters it.
Right, which takes us directly into Section 3, defining the book boyfriend. We need to analyze the specific qualities of this hyper-masculine love interest that fulfills this unique relational fantasy.
And the first step is defining what the book boyfriend is not.
He is not an alpha hole.
That's the first critical distinction. The sources are unanimous on that. The female lead does not want to be bossed around or owned or treated like arm candy or a prize.
No, Bryce in House of Earth and Blood actively calls men out for their possessive alpha hole behavior. Grace in Kaladin's Grace is literally running away from a cheating, controlling ex-husband.
And Violet rejects a guy in Dragon School specifically because his controlling behavior suggests he thinks she can't handle herself.
Right.
The book heroine is strong and independent. The male lead cannot be a toxic, domineering controller. But here's the paradox that makes this fantasy so compelling.
She's independent, but she still wants the guy to be super competent and assertive and have everything handled.
It's such a complex needle to thread.
The sources use the analogy of leadership. It's demoralizing to follow a boss who is completely lost and doesn't know where he's going.
And it's equally frustrating to have a micromanager who doesn't trust you to do your own job.
Exact. The heroine is looking for a good leader in her personal life, someone who commands competence without controlling her age.
And the key word the sources identify over and over again across these relationship fantasies is safe.
Safe, but not safe as in weak or non-threat. Safe as in steady, eventum, unflappable. He is a stable wall who provides boundaries and stability in a chaotic world.
The world of Romantasy is full of existential threats.
She needs a partner who is a foundation, not just another source.
But how does a guy successfully implement those boundaries without crossing the line into alpha hole territory? That sounds like a recipe for friction, especially with a heroine who is defined by her independence.
Well, that friction is actually necessary to the fantasy. The sources suggest he has to be strong enough to say no when it's necessary, even if she is initially furious about it. The material emphasizes that women are acutely aware that they can be crazy sometimes, and they want a partner who can be that stable external force. He has to set boundaries based on safety or competence, and she will, often begrudgingly, respect them later because she trusts his judgment.
That's a fascinating dynamic. The fantasy of trusting the guy's competence enough to respect his leadership, even when it involves momentary conflict.
It speaks to this deep desire for competent protection and deep respect. The book boyfriend is often huge, deadly, and constantly protected. Think of the Umbra Mortis, the shadow of death who protect Bryce.
He's a famous, lethal government murderer, just strolling around.
But crucially, he respects her. He respects her grit and her ability to shoot a gun or handle a magical attack.
He protects, but he doesn't own or silence her. I love the example of Stephen in Kaladin's Grace. He's massive and protective, but when Grace's cheating ex-husband shows up,
Stephen doesn't step in to fight the man.
no, he just stands in the doorway, flexing intimidatingly, and lets Grace find her own inner strength and voice to deal with the guy herself. That balance is everything.
That's the perfect illustration. He provides a perimeter of safety so she can fight her own battle without being physically endangered. He sets the stage for her competence rather than taking over the spotlight.
But this leads us to the critical complexity that the critique highlighted. The Romantasy heroes often exhibit behaviors that, on paper, should be immediate red flags. They should be alpha hole behavior.
Yeah, we have to integrate this paradox now because it reveals the high-stakes emotional requirement of the fantasy.
We have to talk about Ryland, or Rysand in Akatar.
He is the ultimate dark, edgy, controlling guy who dresses in all black. He's the most powerful High Lord, a constant source of danger and possessiveness.
And his initial actions toward Feyre are, well, they're deeply problematic by modern standards. He coerced her into an indecent proposal plot, which she had to agree to because she was about to die.
And then tattooed his sigil on her arm.
Yeah, that kind of possessive act, on paper, is exactly the kind of domineering, non-consensual behavior the heroine supposedly rejects.
And this is where the fantasy gets complicated, illuminating. The fantasy is not about the actions themselves, it's about the outcome, it's about the transformation.
So the high friction, the high danger behaviors, they're tolerated or even desired because they lead to the profound transformative connection that follows.
Right. The reader is willing to suspend disbelief or overlook the problematic nature of the coercion, provided that, in the end, this dangerous, dark, possessive man turns out to be tender and utterly devoted only.
So is the message that this level of desired competence and assertiveness requires a certain level of friction and even darkness to be compelling.
That's precisely what the sources suggest. The fantasy requires a man strong enough to be dangerous, because that guarantees his competence and ability to provide a safe perimeter. The validation comes when that immense strength is turned inward, focused entirely on her well-being and her emotional needs. The woman has the power to tame the untamable.
If the man started out already perfect and tender, there would be no transformative journey.
There'd be no story. And this complexity just completely eviscerates Hollywood's approach, which, as you mentioned, only presents extreme. Men as lurking predators, pure domination.
Complete idiots who need to flaccidly follow the female lead. They get the safety and competence balance completely wrong.
And the visual media failures are just palpable. Look at the casting and characterization in Rings of Power. It was packed with what the sources call lame guys. Erend had zero charisma, just seemed utterly direct.
And Elrond, compared to the iconic Hugo Weaving version, was, well, effeminate and lacked that gravitas.
And let's talk about Isildur, who was reduced to what one of the sources explicitly called an actual simp. He was constantly lost, emotionally volatile, and failed to demonstrate even basic competence or...
These are not just weak men, they're weak characters.
Exactly. Even a hateable villain needs competence to be interesting. But these passive, weak heroes fail to provide that stable foundation or the aspirational strength required by the female emotional fantasy. So they fail to bring in the female audience.
We saw similar issues in Wheel of Time. Characters who should have been traditional heartthrobs embodying competence and leadership, they were stripped of those qualities.
Matt was reduced to a little lost puppy, just unsure. Rand was constantly humiliated, having to confess how sorry he was for being born a curse-gusting man.
And the absolute narrative crime was committed against Lan Mandragoran.
Oh, Lan.
He is supposed to be the most badass, stoic samurai warrior in literary history, the epitome of the stable wall.
Yet he was shown beating his chest and weeping hysterically in agony over a friend in a scene that was entirely manufactured. They stripped him of his stoicism, his competence.
These characters, stripped of their assertiveness, competence, and reliability, they fail the safe, competent leadership test.
They're emotional puddles, not stable walls. And if the Romantasy heroine wants a man who leads well and provides safety, Hollywood is currently providing neither.
Which brings us naturally to the fourth and final component of the Romantasy success formula, covered in Section 4, the transformative connection.
The profound I see you dynamic.
And this is where the female character's feminine power truly shines. And it connects directly back to those high-friction relationships we just discussed with characters like Riley.
Her power is not about magic over the world. It's the unique power she holds to affect and fundamentally change the hyper-masculine love-in.
It's the warrior-poet dynamic.
The book boyfriend superkiller Delt Pectoralis, who is cold, merciless, and intimidating to everyone else in the cosmos, is tender, understanding, and willing to act contrary to his normal, lethal nature.
But only for her.
Only for her. It's the ultimate expression of unique desire. They want a beefcake, who is also tender, a warrior poet. The ultimate fantasy is the uniqueness of the... She is so special and desirable that she alone possesses the power to unlock the hero's emotional side, to make him a better man.
And the reason he can be tender and transformative is because he truly sees into her.
Yes.
This isn't just surface-level attraction based on her looks or even her fighting skills. It's a deep validation of her core self, her vulnerability, and her intelligence.
And this ties directly back to character flaws, which is a huge component the sources analyze. The critique of Hollywood's female leads is that they lack flaws, making them boring, merry, romantasy characters laud.
They generally possess two types of flaws that the book boyfriend helps them navigate.
Right. The first is the self-conscious flaw, the one she's insecure about. Maybe she thinks she's too small, too weak, too bookish, or too emotional.
And the book boyfriend comes in and either sees this flaw and finds it endearing, or special, or interesting, a unique quirk that makes her desirable.
Or he's so overwhelmingly focused on her core goodness that he doesn't even notice the flaw at all.
And this provides such a deeply validating aspect for the reader. It assures you that your own flaw wasn't a big deal to the right person.
But the second flaw is the unknown flaw, the one she has to discover because it's a deeply ingrained defense mechanism. This is often stubbornness or a refusal to ask for help.
Or a general hostility towards men, which is conveniently excused by blaming previous guys for her emotional baggage.
This narrative thread is brilliant because it satisfies the contemporary critique that men are trash while simultaneously retaining the female character. Her stubbornness or hostility she isn't forever controlled by those past negatives.
She has the power to change herself.
And the journey here is so crucial. Most of these stories do not resolve with the passive revelations, amazing all along. That's the Mary Sue trope.
No.
Instead, the hyper-competent male lead usually forces her to grapple with that second unknown flaw, her deep refusal to trust, her fear of vulnerability, and she changes or overcomes it to earn his love in return.
The Romantasy heroine wants a guy worth changing for.
Yeah.
And that flawed character arc is incredibly inspiring because the audience can identify with those hidden, stubborn flaws and believe they too can overcome them to find transformative love. A flawless character robs you of that aspirational journey.
It robs you of the emotional reward of self-improvement. It's about being worthy of the immense sacrifice the warrior poet is making by opening his heart to her. If she doesn't also grow, his transformation seems cheap or meaningless.
So if we just step back and review these four major success patterns of the Romantasy genre, they stand in stark, commercially proven opposition to the current Hollywood template.
First, there has to be intense, unapologetic romance and desire. The leads are not neutered, and the central fantasy is about being overwhelmingly wanted, priority.
Second, the heroine is the heart of the team. She's the essential catalyst, using cleverness, wit, and strategy, not relying on brute, solo strength, or instantaneous leveling up.
She's a coalition.
Third, she finds safety in a competent man who is a good leader. He's assertive, unflappable, and provides stability and boundaries, rejecting both the micromanaging alpha hole and the passive idiot simp.
And fourth, she experiences transformative connection. She is uniquely seen by the cold, lethal man, possessing the feminine power to change and undertaking her own rigorous personal growth to earn that love.
The data is just incredibly clear here. The romantic fantasy shelves are emptied faster than they can be stopped.
While the theater is showing the lone, jacked, flawless chosen one is struggling, Hollywood keeps trying to jam women into the male power template, surrounding them with sidekicks or predictable predators, and fundamentally misunderstanding that the female emotional fan acquires relational complexity and transformative.
This understanding forces us to reflect again on the nature of the male lead's company. We spend time detailing the paradox of characters like Riley, who demonstrate possessive or controlling behavior early on.
And it's so important to note that the fantasy allows for that high friction and danger, provided the outcome is transformative connection and genuine validation. The desire for a competent, stable wall who provides safe seems to coexist with an appetite for a challenge, a man who is difficult to crack but unique.
So here's the final thought for you to mull over, reflecting on this successful yet complex literary phenomenon. Given the massive commercial success driven by this demand for transformative, high-friction love, is the underlying fantasy less about perfect partnership and more about proving the unique, world-altering power of feminine connection?
Is the reader drawn specifically to the idea that her love and her love alone can reform a dangerous, necessary?
Something to think about the next time you see one of those massive fantasy novels flying off the shelf.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.